You're listening to episode number 28 of Overprescribed. Welcome to Overprescribed, the show that raises America's awareness on pharmaceutical medications in this country, all in an effort to help you, the everyday consumer, to live the safest, healthiest, and really most informed medication experience possible. I'm your host, Mika Pollack, and on today's show, we're talking about the newest opioid to hit the market. If you haven't heard about the drug, it's called sufentanil, and it's coming in a tablet that's sublingual. So you're going to hear this term a lot during this podcast, sublingual, and basically means that the tablet itself will be situated or applied under the tongue. Now, sufentanil itself, the drug, is not a brand new drug. It's actually been on the market for a really long time, but it's been administered as an IV or intravenously. And what's making this drug so groundbreaking is, or this news story so groundbreaking as of late, is a couple things. One, this drug is now going to be released in this tablet form that's sublingual. So apply under the tongue. It will dissolve in your mouth. And it's really controversial because a number of reasons, but the number one reason is that it will become one of the strongest, or is going to be incredibly strong, or one of the strongest opioids on the market. And the nonprofit that's been around for several decades, Public Citizen, they hail themselves as protecting health, safety, and democracy. They most recently got in the game on pushing back on this and submitted a letter. They submitted a letter to the FDA expressing their discontent with this decision, but also they submitted a press release or press announcement on their website. It was dated November 2nd. And I really want to take the time for this episode here to focus on those two things. Public Citizen's public press announcement or positioning on this new drug, this new opioid, as well as a letter that's going to be referenced in this press announcement that was written within days of the FDA decision to approve sufentanil tablets for release for selling or marketing in the U.S. So I have the November 2nd press release here in my hand, and it reads as follows. First of all, it's titled, FDA Makes Wrong Call. Super strong opioid medication will be abused and kill people. FDA rigged committee vote to ensure a positive recommendation. So it starts out, the text itself, the full body starts out as the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA, is recklessly and needlessly endangering people by approving a super strong opioid, Public Citizen and the head of a key FDA advisory committee said today. The FDA gave the green light for the medication, which is called sufentanil sublingual tablet, which goes by the brand name Disuvia, and that's spelled D as in David, S-U-V as in Victor, I-A. And is used to treat moderate to severe acute pain in a medically supervised setting. It is 5 to 10 times more potent than fentanyl and 1,000 times more potent than morphine. The announcement here continues with a quote from Dr. Sidney Wolf, who is the founder and senior advisor of Public Citizen Health Research Group. And he says, quote, "It is certain that Disuvia will worsen the opioid epidemic and kill people needlessly. It will be taken by medical personnel and others for whom it has not been prescribed, and many of those will overdose and die. It is likely, if not certain, that Disuvia will be banned after enough such deaths occur, and the inevitable House oversight hearings are held investigating why the FDA approved this opioid with no unique benefit but unique harms." End quote. The article or the announcement continues by saying, Public Citizen and Dr. Rayford Brown, who is chair of the FDA's Anesthetic and Analgesic Drug Products Advisory Committee, last month warned the agency not to approve the medication. Brown's public stance was highly unusual because he bucked his committee's recommendation and publicly warned against approval. Brown has described Disuvia as so potent The abusers of the intravenous formulation of it, so this is the one which has been available since 1984 for use by clinicians only in hospital settings for general anesthesia. So the abusers of the intravenous formulation of it often die when they inject the first dose. He said he has witnessed this in resuscitating physicians, medical students, technicians, and other healthcare providers, some successfully. Dr. Brown here, another quote in the announcement by saying, quote, "I am very disappointed with the decision of the agency to approve Disuvia. This action is inconsistent with the charter of the agency. As I discussed with the representatives of the agency today, the lack of efficacy data and the sponsor's inadequate response to safety concerns have not been addressed since the FDA's complete response letter was sent in 2017. Clearly, the issue of the safety of the public is not important to the commissioner, despite his attempts to obfuscate and misdirect. I will continue to hold the agency accountable for their response to the worst public health problem since the 1918 influenza epidemic," end quote. Despite, in the article it says here, the announcement says, despite FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb's misleading statement today that, quote, "we routinely seek advisory committee input on new opioid product approvals," end quote, the committee, end quote, the committee review process was rigged. Says Dr. Wolf. So despite despite Scott Gottlieb's, the FDA commissioner's statement, Dr. Wolf is asserting the committee review process was rigged. And this announcement ends by stating the following: the FDA's Anesthetic and Analgesic Drug Products Advisory Committee last month recommended approving Disuvia by a 10-3 vote, whereas Dr. Brown was absent. But the meeting at which the committee considered the medication should have included the full Drug Safety and Risk Management Advisory Committee, of which Dr. Wolf was a member from 2008 to 2012. Dr. Wolf said. In fact, the committee had been invited to a meeting last May to consider Disuvia. However, in the late summer, the FDA disinvited all but 3 members who participated in the October meeting, Wolf said. And that's the end of that announcement. Now, on the surface, just reading that, it's very clear, at least from Public Citizen's announcement, that what happened and how this approval took place was wrong. People who should have been in the room to make a decision were not in the room. And Public Citizen's assertion is that this was intentional, and this is possibly going to lead to a worsening of the opioid epidemic that America is currently experiencing as we speak. Now, within this article or this announcement, there was actually a hyperlink to the letter. There was a letter that was sent in, and I'm going to get into that letter in a second, to specific individuals at the FDA to spell out in more detail their reasoning as to why this sublingual sufentanil tablet should have never been approved in the first place. So let's take a look at this letter. It's a 5-page letter that was, again, written on behalf of all of us in America by Public Citizen, really, and sent directly to 3 specific individuals at the FDA. The letter is dated October 18th, and it's addressed to 3 people. First, it's addressed to Scott Gottlieb, who is a physician. He is the commissioner or the head of the FDA, which is based out of Maryland. And it was also sent to 2 of his colleagues. The first person is Dr. Janet Woodcock. She is the director of the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, which is a really significant center or group of individuals within the FDA that tends to oftentimes be a part of decisions when it comes to these drug approvals. And it's also addressed to Dr. Sharon Hertz. She's a director at another division in the FDA, the Office of Drug Evaluation, Office of New Drugs. And she's also based out of Maryland with Dr. Gottlieb and Dr. Woodcock. So the letter starts off by stating, Dear Doctors Gottlieb, Woodcock, and Hertz, Public Citizen, a nonprofit consumer advocacy organization with more than 500,000 members and supporters nationwide, is writing to strongly urge the FDA to reject Acelerex Pharmaceuticals' new drug application for the sublingual dosage form of the high-potency opioid sufentanil, stated by the Drug Enforcement Agency to be 1,000 times more potent than morphine, despite the 10-3 vote on October 12th, 2018 by FDA's Anesthetic and Analgesic Drug Products Advisory Committee, which goes by, and you're going to be referenced quite often here in this letter, I'm going to call them the AADPAC, for favoring such approval. As you know, the current deadline for your decision is November 3rd, 2018. So let's just back up for a second. So basically, the drug, the sublingual form of this drug of sufentanil has been pushed forward in a new drug application, or an NDA, by a company by the name of Acelerex Pharmaceuticals. That's spelled ACELRX. Okay. And apparently this letter, if you capture some of the dates or was paying attention to some of the dates, this letter dated October 18th was literally written probably within a week of this 10-3 vote. The letter continues by stating, our reasons for urging the FDA not to approve sublingual sufentanil tablets include the following. So there's 3 reasons they're actually listing here. Number 1 reason they list is, quote, a strong statement opposing approval from the FDA's AADPAC's longstanding chair, Dr. Rayford Brown, who was a co-signer of this letter. Dr. Brown had previous commitments and was therefore unable to attend the AADPAC October 12, 2018 meeting, but summarized the basis of his opposition to the approval of sufentanil below. Number 2 reason is the inexplicable failure of the FDA to have the full Drug Safety and Risk Management Advisory Committee. That's going to be referred quite often to as well in this letter, and I'm going to refer to them as the DSRMAC, again, that's the Drug Safety and Risk Management Advisory Committee. Participate in the October 12th, 2018 AADPAC meeting, therefore predictably increasing the odds of a vote favoring FDA approval. And number 3 reason they note here is the FDA's unrealistic and dangerous decision before the meeting, reflected in its AADPAC's briefing materials, that the 2 major safety problems causing the agency to reject sublingual sufentanil tablets in 2017 were no longer a barrier to its approval, and that the benefits thereby outweigh the risk. The following is a more detailed discussion of each of these reasons. Okay, the first detailed reason is titled Dr. Brown's Statement Opposing Approval, and it reads, as the chair of the FDA Advisory Committee charged with evaluation of analgesic products, I have been involved in the assessment of countless opioid products over the last 4 years. During that time, I have developed a sensitivity to the harms that can be associated with the marketing of new opioid compounds, and have been forced to consider the lack of ability of the agency to predict the behavior of opioid drugs and to enforce post-marketing regulation. It is my observation that once the FDA approves an opioid compound, there are no safeguards as to the population that will be exposed, the post-marketing analysis of prescribing behavior, or the ongoing analysis of the risk of the drug to the general population relative to its benefit to the public health. Briefly stated, for all of the opioids that have been marketed in the last 10 years, there has not been sufficient demonstration of safety, nor has there been post-marketing assessment of who is taking the drug, how often prescribing is inappropriate, and whether there was ever a reason to risk the health of the general population by having one more opiate on the market. Sufentanil is a case in point, says Dr. Brown here. He says it has been used as an intravenous IV agent by clinicians only in hospital settings for more than 20 years. It is a very potent opioid with a substantial risk of respiratory depression, diversion, abuse, and death. It is so potent The abusers of this intravenous formulation often die when they inject the first dose. I have witnessed this in resuscitating physicians, medical students, technicians, and other healthcare providers, some successfully, as a part of my duties as a clinician in a major academic medical center. Because it is so potent, the dosing volume, whether in the IV formulation or the sublingual form, can be quite small. It is thus an extremely divertible drug, and I predict that we will encounter diversion, abuse, and death within the early months of its availability on the market. The agency feels that there is a capability so far not demonstrated to regulate this drug so that it is used only in closely controlled settings. In order to have this happen, the education of all prescribers would need to be guaranteed. This has not been demonstrated with any other opioid, and given the lack of teeth in the current risk evaluation and mitigation strategies for opioids, there is currently no educational nor regulatory scheme that will guarantee that this drug will be used only as described in the label. Lack of historical ability of the FDA to enforce controls, the pharmacologic potency of the drug, and the ease with which this drug will be diverted are some of the reasons that I would never consider this product for marketing in the U.S. Sublingual sufentanil represents a danger to the general public health and will make our job of protecting Americans more difficult. Okay, so that's the first detailed discussion on their number one reason for disagreeing with the FDA's decision to approve this medication. And there are very substantial reasons here from Dr. Brown. Just the last line alone, it will make it more difficult, meaning that there's already a difficulty. Number two thing that I noticed here in Dr. Brown's statement was the fact that there is not enough in a stronghold of process and existence on post-marketing surveillance, post-marketing research. And the sheer lack of ability to ensure to guarantee there's not diversion, death, abuse, etc., is a huge, huge, big problem that is substantial and relevant. Now, the second number two of the three detailed discussion reasons here include this one here. So this one says number two reason, the inexplicable failure of the FDA to have the full DSRMAC participate in the October 12, 2018 AA DPAC meeting. So here's the other reason why the authors of this letter believe that this drug should have never been approved. And it reads as follows. One reason that the FDA established the relatively new DSRMAC, which first met in 2002, was to augment the clinical expertise of the relevant clinicians, in the case of the AA DPAC anesthesiologists, with people who had more expertise in drug safety, pharmacoepidemiology, risk management, and other areas, thus increasing the overall effectiveness of advisory committees' reviews of drug safety. One of us, Dr. Sidney Wolf, was a member of this committee from 2008 to 2012. It is clear from attending the DSRMAC meetings as a member, including many meetings concerning opioids, and from reading transcripts of the meetings, that the issues regarding safety were much more definitively discussed than at earlier meetings prior to the important addition of the DSRMAC. In addition to the nature of discussions, when votes were taken on the issue of approval of new drugs or the withdrawal of already approved drugs, the views expressed by the DSRMAC members had an important influence on the outcome of the votes. At the October 12, 2018 AA DPAC meeting at which the NDA, the new drug application, for sublingual sufentanil tablets was considered, all four of the anesthesiologists on the committee, as well as two other anesthesiologists who were temporary voting members, voted to approve the drug. The three votes against approval of sublingual sufentanil tablets were cast by one invited member of the DSRMAC. And it says here in parentheses, only two DSRMAC members were invited to participate as temporary voting members. as well as a critical care nurse and an epidemiologist/physician, both of whom were temporary voting members. It is likely, if not certain, that had the full DSRMAC attended the meeting, either the drug would have been rejected or the vote would have been much closer, making the FDA's decision to reject it, as we are asking now, less complicated. The FDA appears to have made a deliberate decision to avoid including the full DSRMAC in the review of sublingual sufentanil tablets in order to tilt to outcome of the AADPAC in favor of approval. Given that there is an ongoing epidemic of preventable prescription opioid-induced deaths, it is inexcusable and unacceptable that all FDA advisory committee meetings involving opioids do not include the full DSRMAC. A serious mistake made in the case of sublingual sufentanil tablets. So that was the number 2 detailed reason or discussion on why the authors of this letter do not agree with the FDA's approval. And again, it's another substantial one, because if you want to have as much of a rich a collective of experts in the room to make these incredibly serious, far-reaching decisions on medications that will make their way to the public, then you want to make sure you have as many people as possible in the room to make those decisions. This particular letter goes on to conclude with this third and final detailed decision or reason on why this approval should not have been made. And it reads as follows. It's titled FDA's Unwarranted Decision to Reverse its Assessment of the Safety Problems Regarding Sublingual Sufentanil Tablets Based on Inadequate Evidence. So now it's going to get into that as the main reason. And it reads as follows. In addition to accepting as adequate the increased number of patients given the 30 microgram dose of sublingual sufentanil tablets in clinical trials since the 2017 rejection of sufentanil, the FDA wrongly bought into the company's proposal to add an additional safeguard to avoid what they're calling here in the letter, quote, dropped doses, end quote, instances in which the researchers could not account for all of the sufentanil dose units. This was correctly considered during the review of the initial NDA submission to be a possible route for diversion or misuse. So basically they're saying before this approval, this NDA was even out there and the approval had to be in place, it was known already that there were drop doses, and that potentially those doses or those medications had been, or those tablets had been diverted, misused, used inappropriately by somebody, some way. And so I guess the company, the drug company that makes these sublingual sufentanil tablets had to respond to that. But there's an assertion here that the safeguard that was proposed to ensure that there's no misuse or diversion, it was not appropriate. The letter continues to read, as a matter of fact, this logic misses well-documented instances of diversion not mentioned in the briefing documents. Diversion of sufentanil by anesthesiologists and other medical personnel mentioned in Dr. Brown's statement above. This is discussed in 2 published studies. So basically they're saying that 2 published studies in 2 separate places have already referenced this diversion, where you actually basically have healthcare professionals, healthcare providers stealing these opioid pills or the opioid medication, a la Nurse Jackie style. I don't know, but there's 2 references here, 2 published studies. The first, according to the letter, the first entitled Evidence of Addiction by Anesthesiologists as Documented by Hair Analysis stated that, and they're providing a direct quote, states that numerous factors have been proposed to explain the high incidence of abuse among anesthesiologists. They have easy access to a wide range of potent psychoactive drugs. Opioids promote rapid tolerance and dependence, particularly the highly lipid-soluble agents, for example, fentanyl. Diversion of these agents is relatively simple since only small doses will initially provide an effect desired by the abuser. Traditionally, opioids are the drugs of choice selected for abuse by anesthesiologists. Fentanyl and sufentanil are the most common, followed by piperidine and morphine. The second article, entitled Anesthetic Drug Abuse by Anesthesiologists, states that, quote here, despite the fact that alcohol abuse is the most common among anesthesiologists, the abuse of anesthetic agents causes more concern due to its high dependence potential and consequences, which are often fatal. The most widely used drugs are opioids. They have in parentheses here fentanyl and sufentanil. Propofol, that's the medication that led to the death of Michael Jackson, and inhalational anesthetics. Young professionals are the most affected, and among the consequences of drug abuse are workplace absence and even death. The letter states, in closing, for the above reasons, all of us strongly urge you to reject this needless and dangerous addition to the FDA-approved opioid armamentarium. It has no truly unique benefits and will only add to the worsening, not the mitigation, of the opioid epidemic in this country. Thank you for your prompt attention to this urgent public health matter. And it's signed sincerely, Dr. Rayford Brown from the University of Kentucky's anesthesiology and pediatrics group at the College of Medicine, Dr. Sidney Wolf, who is a founder and senior advisor at Public Citizens Health Research Group, and his colleagues, Dr. Mina Aladdin and Dr. Michael Carome. So what do you think about this? Does it make any sense at all to have this new opioid on the market? You know, on the surface, people would say, you know what? It makes no sense. I mean, we're in opioid, we're in the swings of a major opioid epidemic in the U.S. It's being addressed, but it's not fully addressed just yet. People are still dying from opioid use. And here we then introduce another drug on the market that's going to become the strongest and has huge potential for abuse, misuse, death, diversion. And this concerns a lot of people. But what do you think about that? We would love to hear from you. We would love to hear your thoughts. As a matter of fact, what I'm most curious about is the response from the FDA to this letter dated October 18th. We will do our best here at the Overprescribed Show to follow the story behind this and the FDA's response. But one thing's for sure, it sounds like it's going to move forward. It's going to be on the market. There's going to be a restricted access or restricted use parameter set on this, but there's doubt around that. And the doubt that's been proposed by the folks over at Public Citizen who have authored this letter is very substantial and very relevant. And so we're going to be paying attention. We hope you will as well. And we thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Overprescribed podcast. The Overprescribed podcast will be shifting from a weekly podcast to a monthly podcast. Please continue to subscribe, continue to reach out to us at talk@overprescribedpodcast.com, talk@overprescribedpodcast.com, as well as through Twitter at _overprescribed. Again, that's at _overprescribed. And tune in next month in December 2018 for the next episode release of the Overprescribed podcast. Thank you for your support and talk again soon.